Being home alone usually feels peaceful. No noise, no interruptions, just quiet. But that silence can change fast. A sound in another room, a light you don't remember turning on, or a door that wasn't open before. In this video, you'll hear three scary horror stories about being home alone that started calm and slowly became impossible to explain. If you enjoy horror stories like this, like the video and subscribe. And if you want to support the channel even more, super thanks are always appreciated.
I have worked in audio engineering for the better part of a decade. Sound is my life. I know how to clean it, manipulate it, and isolate it. I find comfort in the predictable nature of frequencies and waveforms. But I am telling you this story because I need you to understand that silence is not empty. Silence is just a canvas, and sometimes things paint themselves onto it that you are not meant to hear. It happened last November. My uncle Jerry, a wealthy architect, asked me to look after his property while he went on a month-long excursion to Europe. His house is this modern, isolated structure tucked deep into the Cascade foothills in Washington state. It is a beautiful nightmare of glass and steel. The entire back wall of the house, facing the dense pine forest, is floor-to-ceiling windows. During the day, it feels like you are floating in the trees. But at night, it turns into a black mirror. You cannot see out, but everything in the dark can see you. I brought my mobile recording rig with me, a high-end laptop, a heavy cardioid condenser microphone, and my studio-grade noise-cancelling headphones. I had a deadline for a narration project, and I figured the solitude would be perfect for getting clean, crisp audio without the background hum of the city. The first week was peaceful. It rained constantly, a rhythmic drumming against the roof that I found soothing. I fell into a routine. I would sleep late, drink coffee while watching the fog roll through the fir trees, and record at night when the house settled. On the second Tuesday, a heavy storm system moved in. The air pressure dropped so low my ears popped, and the wind began to howl around the eaves of the house. It was pitch black outside, no moon, just the driving rain. I set up my walk at the dining room table, which sat right in front of that massive wall of glass. I had my back to the open concept living room and kitchen, facing the reflection of my own laptop screen in the window. I started recording around 10 in the evening. The script was dry, technical material, nothing exciting, just long paragraphs of instruction. I spoke for about 45 minutes, keeping my voice low and steady. The house was dead quiet around me, or so I thought. When I finished the session, I decided to do a quick edit and clean up the track before heading to bed. I pulled my headphones tight over my ears, immersing myself in the digital soundscape. This is where the horror began, though I didn't know it yet. I was scrubbing through the waveform, looking for mouth clicks or heavy breaths to delete. I reached a section about 20 minutes into the recording where I had paused to take a sip of water. On the visual waveform, the line should have been flat. Dead air, absolute silence. But it wasn't. It was a low, jagged modulation running through the gap. It was small, barely a blip, the kind of thing you would usually dismiss as room tone or the hum of the refrigerator. But professional curiosity got the better of me. I highlighted the section and looped it. I turned the volume up. At first, it sounded like static, just a rhythmic, scratchy noise. I applied a noise reduction filter and a compressor to bring the quiet sounds up to the surface. I played it again. My stomach dropped. It wasn't static, it was breathing. It was a wet, congested sound, rhythmic and heavy. Huh? It sounded distinct. It sounded close. I took the headphones off and looked around the room. The house was silent, save for the wind outside. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe it was a feedback loop in the cable. Maybe it was my own breathing echoing off the monitor screen. I was tired, and the isolation was getting to me. I put the headphones back on, determined to prove to myself it was a glitch. I rewound the track to a part where I was speaking. I wanted to see if the noise was present under my voice. I panned my vocal track to the left ear and isolated the background noise to the right ear. I hit play. In my left ear, my own voice read the script. Ensure the primary valve is sealed before rotation. In my right ear, overlapping me perfectly, a voice whispered. It was not a feedback loop. It was a human voice. It was raspy, dry, and terrifyingly close to the microphone. The sensitivity of my mic meant that for a whisper to be picked up that clearly, The source had to be within 3 feet of the diaphragm. The voice whispered, "I see you. Turn around." I froze. My hand hovered over the spacebar, trembling. The air in my lungs turned to ice. That recording was from 20 minutes ago. I had been sitting there, alone, focused on my screen, while someone stood directly behind me, close enough to lean in and whisper into my equipment. I sat there, paralyzed, my brain trying to process the impossibility of it. The house was locked. I had checked the doors. I did not want to turn around. Every instinct in my primal brain screamed at me to stay still, to pretend I hadn't heard it, but I had to know. Slowly, agonizingly, I swiveled my chair around to face the living room. Nothing, just the leather sofa, the dark fireplace, the expensive rug. The room was empty. The kitchen lights reflected off the slate countertops. I let out a shaky breath that sounded too loud in the quiet room. "Okay," I thought. "You are losing it. It is electronic interference. Someone's radio signal cutting into your frequency." I tried to rationalize it away. I turned back to the computer, ready to shut it all down and lock myself in the bedroom with a knife. But then I saw the end of the waveform, the part I hadn't listened to yet. At the very end of the recording, right before I hit the stop button, there was a sharp, high spike in the audio. A loud, transient. I zoomed in on it. I played it. It was the distinct, mechanical sound of a door latch sliding open. I looked at the timestamp. It happened 3 seconds before I stopped recording. I replayed it. It was unmistakable. It was the sound of the basement door latch. The door that was directly to my left, just out of my peripheral vision. I slowly took my headphones off. The silence of the house pressed in on me. I looked at the basement door. It was cracked open, just an inch. A slice of darkness, darker than the rest of the room. It had been closed when I sat down. I was sure of it, and then, coming from that dark crack, I heard it. The same wet, congested breathing I had heard on the track. It wasn't a recording this time. It was live. I did not scream. I did not ask who was there. I moved with a speed I didn't know I possessed. I grabbed my car keys off the table, bolted for the front door, and sprinted into the rain. I didn't even put on shoes. I dove into my car, locked it, and peeled out of the driveway, gravel spraying everywhere. As I swung the headlights around, they swept across the front of the house. In the floor-to-ceiling window, right where I had been sitting, a man was standing. He was gaunt, his skin gray, wearing filthy rags that looked like insulation foam. He was pressing his forehead against the glass, smiling a wide, toothless smile, waving at me. The police arrived 40 minutes later. They found a campsite in the Crawlspace under the house. He had been living there for weeks. He had drilled a small hole through the floorboards under the dining table to listen to me. The breathing wasn't behind me, it was coming from under me. But the cliff was him finally deciding to come up. He had been in the room with me while I edited the audio, watching me realize he was there. They say you can feel it when a house has good bones, or some houses have bad bones, rotten ones. I learned that the hard way when I was 24. My parents had passed away within months of each other, a tragic, sudden turn of events that left me as the sole executor of their estate. Their house was a sprawling Victorian monstrosity in rural Ohio that they adored, but to me, it was just a drafty money pit filled with sad memories and the smell of dust. I needed to sell it, and I needed to sell it fast, because the property taxes alone were draining my savings account. I was staying there alone to clear it out and get it ready for the market. To save the commission fee on a realtor, I decided to host a for sale by owner open house on a Saturday in late January. It seemed like a good idea at the time. I spent the morning baking cookies to make the place smell like a home instead of a mausoleum. I unlocked the heavy oak doors, put out the sandwich board sign on the sidewalk, and waited. It was a grueling day. If you have never hosted an open house, you don't realize how invasive it feels. A parade of strangers tromped through my childhood. Bedrooms, opening closets, judging the wallpaper, and asking invasive questions about why my parents died. I felt like an exhibit in a museum. By 4 in the afternoon, I was physically and emotionally drained. The sun was already starting to dip below the horizon, casting long, grey shadows across the lawn. I ushered the last couple out to Nice, pair of retirees looking for a renovation project, and finally locked a deadbolt. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door and exhaled. I was done. I did a sweep of the house. I a habit my dad taught me. Check the windows, check the back door, check the basement. The house was old, and the locks were finicky, so I had to be thorough. Everything was secure. I was alone. Around 7 that evening, a snowstorm rolled in. The forecaster called for flurries, but this was a Great Lakes whiteout. The temperature plummeted, and the wind began to howl against the vinyl siding, rattling the old single-pane windows in their frames. The house, which usually felt merely empty, began to feel oppressive. I made some tea and sat in the living room, trying to read a book, but I couldn't settle. The silence of the house wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. I kept feeling watched. Yet, know that sensation, that prickle on the back of your neck, that biological alarm system that tells you a predator is staring at you from the tall grass. It was screaming at me. Every time the house settled or a floorboard popped, I flinched. At 9 o'clock, I went into the kitchen to rinse my mug. The kitchen has a view of the backyard, which is lined with dense woods. I have a motion sensor floodlight back there, aimed at the detached garage. As I was standing at the sink, the floodlight clicked on, illuminating the swirling snow in a cone of bright white light. I froze. I stared out, my heart jumping into my throat. Nothing, just white noise and trees whipping in the wind. I waited a full minute, my hand gripping the edge of the sink, but the light stayed on. Eventually, it clicked off, plunging the yard back into darkness. I told myself it was a deer, or maybe just the wind moving a branch in front of the sensor. I forced myself to walk away from the window. I went back to the living room and turned up the volume on the television, trying to drown out the wind. Half an hour later, I heard a noise from upstairs. It was a heavy thud, distinct, solid. It sounded exactly like a boot dropping onto the floorboards above my head. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that made my hands shake. I muted the TV instantly. I sat there, rigid, straining my ears. The house groaned in the wind. "It is just an old house," I whispered to myself. "The storm is knocking something around in the attic. Maybe a branch hit the roof." But then I heard a creak, the distinct, high-pitched whine of the third step on the main staircase, the one that always squeaked when you stepped on the left side. Someone was walking down the stairs. I did not call out. I did not yell hello, like they do in the movies. I knew, with a sickening certainty, that I was not alone. I grabbed the heavy brass fireplace poker from the hearth, the metal cold in my sweating palm, and I backed into the corner of the room where the landline was. I dialed 911 with shaking fingers. 911, "What is your emergency?" the dispatcher asked. "I think someone is in my house," I whispered, my voice trembling so hard I could barely articulate the words. "I am at 420 Oak Street. We have offices in the area, ma'am, but the roads are extremely hazardous due to the storm. It might take some time for them to reach you. Stay on the line." "Are you in a safe place?" "I am in the living room," I said, my eyes fixed on the empty archway that led to the hall. As I spoke, the footsteps stopped. Dead silence. It was as if the house was holding its breath. Then, a voice called out from the hallway. It was calm, polite, and unmistakably male. "Sarah, are you still conducting the tour?" My stomach dropped into my shoes. I recognized the voice immediately. It was a man from earlier that day. He had come in alone, wearing a heavy, oversized trench coat that smelled of stale tobacco. He had looked unkempt, his hair greasy, his eyes darting around the room rather than looking at the features of the house. He had asked weird questions. "Does the basement lock from the inside? Do the neighbors hear much? Is the security system active?" I had assumed he was just an eccentric browser, a harmless weirdo. "I have the police on the phone," I screamed, my voice cracking. "Get out!" "But I have a question about the master bedroom," the voice said. "Closer now. Just outside the living room archway, the closet. It is very spacious, plenty of room to wait." The realization hit me like a physical blow to the gut. He had never left. He had slipped into the walk-in closet in the master bedroom while I was busy showing the retirees the kitchen downstairs. He had been up there for 5 hours. He had been sitting in the dark, surrounded by my mother's old dresses, waiting for the sun to go down, waiting for the storm to trap us together. "The police are coming," I yelled again, gripping the poker so hard my knuckles turned white. "The roads are blocked, Sarah," he said. He stepped into the doorway. He was not wearing his coat anymore. He was in his shirt sleeves, holding a roll of silver duct tape in one hand and a box cutter in the other. He looked comfortable. He looked like he lived there. He smiled, and it was the coldest, most devoid of humanity expression I have ever seen. "I checked the weather report," he said softly. "Nobody is coming for a long time." He took a step toward me. I did not wait to see what he would do. I did not freeze. I swung the fireplace poker with every ounce of adrenaline-fueled hysteria I possessed. I didn't aim for his head. I aimed for his knee. It was a sickening crunch of bone. He howled, in pain, and collapsed sideways, clutching his leg. The box cutter clattered across the hardwood floor. I didn't stop to look. I didn't check if he was unconscious. I ran. I scrambled over the back of the sofa, sprinted to the front door, and fumbled with the deadbolt. My fingers felt like clumsy sausages, slipping on the metal, but I managed to. Turn it, I burst out into the blizzard. The cold air hit me like a wall of ice, stealing the breath from my lungs. The snow was knee-deep. I ran to my car, praying the keys were in my pocket. They were. I dove into the driver's seat, locked the doors, and started the engine. As I threw the car into reverse, my headlights swept across the front porch. He was standing there. He was leaning against the doorframe, putting no weight on his right leg, his face twisted in a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. He didn't try to chase me. He just watched me leave. I drove to the police station, skidding on ice, crying so hard I could barely see the road. They arrested him an hour later. The police had to use a snowplow to get to the house. He hadn't tried to run. He was sitting in my father's armchair, drinking my dad's expensive scotch, waiting for them. Here is the part that keeps me up at night. The part that made me sell that house for half its value, just to be rid of it. When the police searched his backpack, they found a change of clothes, a set of surgical knives, and a layout of my house, drawn on a napkin. But they also found a digital camera. There weren't photos of the house, there were photos of me. There were pictures of me sleeping, pictures of me watching TV, pictures taken from the foot of my bed. The timestamps on the photos were from 3 days prior. He hadn't just hidden in the closet that afternoon. He had been living in the attic for 3 days before the open house even started. He watched me sleep. He watched me shower. He listened to me talk on the phone. He only came down to the open house to introduce himself, so I would know his face when he finally killed me.
I am a tech guy. I work in cybersecurity for a mid-sized firm. I trust machines more than I trust people because machines are logical. They follow a set of binary rules. If a machine fails, there is a reason, a bug, a short circuit, a bad line of code. It doesn't lie to you. It doesn't have hidden motives, or so I thought. This happened when I moved into my first solo apartment near the university. The neighborhood was sketchy, known for a high rate of break-ins, so naturally, I rigged the place up like a digital fortress. I didn't go for a standard alarm system like a DT. I built my own server. I set up hardwired IP cameras in the living room, the kitchen, and the hallway, all feeding to a dedicated monitor on my desk in my bedroom. I could see every inch of my apartment from my chair. I felt like a king in a castle, surrounded by emotive data. It was a Friday night. I was gaming, headset on, deep in a raid with my guild. It was around 2 in the morning, the kind of late night where reality starts to blur at the edges. My secondary monitor, the one with the camera feeds, flashed. It was the motion detection alert for camera 1. The living room. I glanced over, annoyed at the distraction. The feed showed the dark living room in grainy black and white night vision. Nothing moving. Just the shadows of the streetlights, casting bars across the floor through the blinds. Glitch, I thought. I adjusted the sensitivity settings, assuming. A moth had flown past the lens, or a car headlight had triggered the sensor, and I went back to my game. 10 minutes later, it flashed again. I looked over, ready to disable the alert. Still nothing on the screen. But this time, my eyes caught something odd. The timestamp on the video feed. It was lagging. The time stamped on the video said 2 hours, 4 minutes, and 30 seconds. But my computer clock, the one synced to the internet, said 2 hours, 15 minutes, and 0 seconds. The feed was delayed by over 10. Minutes. I frowned, confused. That shouldn't happen. It was a hardwired system with zero latency. I started typing, trying to ping the router, thinking maybe the buffer was full or the hard drive was failing. I was treating it like an IT problem. I was trying to debug a horror story. Then, on the delayed feed, the front door opened. My stomach dropped. I watched 10 minutes in the past as the lock was picked cleanly. The door swung open silently. A figure slipped inside. He was dressed all in black, wearing a tight ski mask. He didn't look around frantically like a nervous junkie. He moved with terrifying purpose. He closed the door gently behind him, making sure it didn't latch loudly. He walked into the center of the living room and stopped. He looked directly up at the camera. He knew exactly where it was hidden in the bookshelf. He raised a gloved hand and waved. Then he pointed a finger. He pointed down the hallway, toward my bedroom. Panic, cold and sharp, seized me. I tried to do the math in my head, but my brain was misfiring. This footage was 10 minutes old. If he walked down the hallway 10 minutes ago, he wasn't in the living room anymore. He was already at my door. I ripped my headset off. The apartment was silent. I spun around in my chair to face the bedroom door. It was closed. I always kept it closed while gaming to block out the noise of the fridge. I grabbed the aluminum baseball bat I kept by the desk. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst through my ribs. I looked back at the monitor. The figure on the screen was moving again. He was walking toward the hallway. He vanished from camera 1. A few seconds later, he appeared on camera 3, the hallway. I watched, helpless, as the man walked up to my bedroom door on the screen. He put his ear against the wood. He listened. He must have heard me typing, heard me talking to my teammates. I looked at my actual bedroom door. It was still, but I knew he was on the other side. On the screen, the man reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, blocky device with an antenna. He placed it on the floor right outside my door. A signal jammer. That was why the feed was lagging. He was jamming the live upload, forcing the system to buffer the old footage. He wanted me to see this. He was playing with me. On the screen, the man stood up. He didn't open the door. Instead, he turned and looked at the hallway camera again. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a notepad. He held it up to the lens. He flipped it open. In thick black marker, it read, "Check the closet." My blood turned to ice. My bedroom closet. The one directly behind me. The one I leave open because it's full of junk. I spun around in my chair. The closet door was closed. I never closed the closet door. I didn't think. I didn't breathe. I threw myself backward, chair and all, crashing onto the floor just as the closet door burst open. He lunged. He was fast, a blur of black clothing and a gleaming knife. He had been inside the room with me. He must have slipped in while I was focused on the game before he set up the jammer outside. But the chair had tripped him up. He stumbled over my legs, slashing the air where my throat had been a second before. I scrambled, kicking out wildly. My foot connected with his face, a solid, crunching impact that snapped his head back. He grunted and fell onto the bed. I didn't stay to fight. I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline fueling my limbs. I bolted out the bedroom door, down the hallway, and out the front door. I ran to the 24-hour gas station down the block, screaming for the clerk to call the cops. They caught him. He was still in my apartment, trying to dismantle the server to erase the footage. It turns out, he wasn't just a random burglar. He was the previous tenant. He had wired the apartment himself before he got evicted. He knew the layout. He knew the wiring. He knew exactly how to loop the feed. He had keys that the landlord didn't know about. But the worst part? When the police reviewed the unjammed footage from the local hard drive, they saw what actually happened while I was gaming. He hadn't just walked in. He had stood directly behind my chair for 5 full minutes while I was playing my game. He was standing inches from me, watching me, breathing down my neck. He even leaned in and smelled my hair. He only went into the closet to wait for me to go to sleep. I moved out the next day. I live in a building with a doorman now. I don't use cameras anymore. I realized that watching a screen gives you a false sense of control. You think you are the observer, but in reality, you are just providing a show for someone else. And sometimes, the thing you are looking for on the screen is already standing right behind you. And that's all for tonight. Remember, the most terrifying monsters are the ones that look just like us. The ones who might even live right next door. If these stories serve as a good reminder to trust your instincts, then show your support and like and subscribe. Hitting that bell means you'll get a warning before the next nightmare begins. Sleep well, if you can.